Hello, welcome to another live Google Hangout on the Living Income Guaranteed. And today we will be continuing with our series of discussions on sustainability. And today is the turn of environmental sustainability. We will be discussing this topic with Garbrielle Goodrow. Hi, Garb.
Hi, Marlen. How you doing?
Fine, thank you. So I'd like to remind our audience that there's open questions or comments if you want to place them throughout the Hangout. We will be discussing for about 40 minutes, so please make sure that you place in your comment or question throughout that time frame. And so this is a key concept and a key discussion that has been also hyped throughout this week with the climate protests and the massive amount of people in New York City marching to kind of, blame corporations for not applying their corporate social responsibility and actually tending to these matters, which is what are we doing to the environment? How can we cut carbon emissions? How can we tax them or else? But we will start looking at from the beginning of the problem and on to realizing what solutions can be implemented. So that is the discussion of today. And I'll begin with pointing out one of the basic parameters that we have in relation to sustainability, going straight to our environment and nature, which is that quote by Albert Einstein that says that if bees disappeared from the surface of the globe, man would only have 4 years left of life, because if there's no pollination coming from bees, there's no plants, there's no fruits, there's no food, there's no animals, and therefore there's no man. Right now we live in an economic system that doesn't really place much attention onto this environmental and ecologic sustainability and the cycles of nature. So let's begin with our discussion, Garv, because here we have what has sustainability in terms of, what kind of common sense and have we lost in terms of our resources not being effectively considered, and essentially only focusing on that which we produce and that which we consume. But what are the problems mainly that you can observe right now?
Okay. The first problem that I see is that we look more at how much something costs rather than to see what actually is going into the product that is being produced. So if you only look at, or actually also corporations only look at what kind of profit they can make from a product rather than seeing how the production line, how it affects, the environment, how it affects the people creating the product. And so it creates this imbalance within, the people that are producing the product, as well as the money that is being put into the product, and what the corporations are getting out of the product. Their profit margin is much more than, and they can give a lot more to the people that are creating the product rather than just take. So it's just this mentality of profit rather than considering the other factors that are involved in creating the product.
Yeah, exactly. And also we have planned obsolescence, which we were mentioning briefly in our last Hangout, so maybe you can expand on this. What is the problem and how we have created the problem of planned obsolescence?
Right. So planned obsolescence is basically creating a product to break. Eventually after, say, a year, 2 years, or even like a light bulb, a couple months. So, we can just keep producing these light bulbs. Companies keep getting the profit from people having to go and buy the product. So, for instance, like the light bulb, there's documentaries out there explaining that they've actually invented light bulbs that will last 100 years. And there's one, I don't know where it's located, but there is one still lit from 100 years ago. So it's not like the technology is not out there, and it's not like we don't have the resources and the, brain power to produce these materials and products efficiently. But again, we're more concerned about getting something cheap and not really considering the waste and all the environmental factors that are being affected with this mentality of just buying cheap, and who cares how it's going to affect the environment in the long run.
Yes, that would be like our collective ignorance, really, and our collective complacency to simply conform with buying the thing and using it and disposing it, and not really being interested in what was before the production of that product that I bought and what will happen to it as I dispose it. We live in a disposable society. I mean, more and more things are simply made to, as you were saying, meant to break, and you dispose it, and that goes, for example, that all that material from old appliances and so forth goes and it's shipped to India, where little kids are actually scraping the copper from all our motherboards and all our computers, causing a lot of environmental problems, because children get sick as they take out these materials. It also creates pollution, and all for the sake of money, once again, for them to have a source of income. So even off our garbage, people are making money. There's also a very cool documentary I suggest watching. It's called Canning, which in America, that's a source of income, in essence. Recollecting all of these cans and water, plastic bottles. And once again, that's for mostly homeless people that don't have a dignified living income in that matter. And this becomes their source of income, going through all our garbage cans in the city. For example, New York City, very common that this happens. So, Garb, let's continue going on this lack of consideration between the relationship that we have as human beings in our habitat. How has this affected? I was looking at how we have placed ourselves as the supreme animals, so to speak, in the environment. Even if we are still part of it, we see ourselves as above it. So how have our values actually affected nature, and how have we used or abused animals, for example, in this matter?
Right. So one value that we placed above, let's say, animals, for instance, we can look at the rhino poaching in South Africa for an example. They're killing, or they're not even killing, but they're just ripping out the horns of the rhino, leaving them for dead, not really even slaughtering them first. And they're selling these rhino ivory horns in China. They're like the big consumers of them, because they have this belief that rhino horns can cure ailments and do all sorts of things that it's been studied and tested, and the corn has no medicinal reliefs, or it can't cure any ailments. It's basically the same substance as a fingernail or like a horse's hoof. So it's just like a belief system that's been passed down generation to generation, and it's just been accepted and allowed through the people, with even having this knowledge of knowing that it's not really going to cure anything. And so we allow this, and we allow basically the rhinos to almost become extinct, and not really caring for their survival, or caring for how much they're suffering within their own habitat. And we're going into their habitat, killing them, leaving maybe their family, like their children, and they probably won't survive. The rhino babies. And so, it's really affecting the animal kingdom. We are going into their, wild habitats and taking from them when it's, not sustainable, and it's not supportive for them.
Yes, what we have missed as well is biodiversity because we tend to only look at, for example, GDP measures in terms of economy. You know, we only focus on, okay, we are making this amount of money, but there's no measure in the environment. And as I've mentioned before, for example, in China, they're saying, well, GDP is no longer a measure of success because our environment is being really, really damaged by us pursuing this industrial expansion and so forth. And also what came to mind as you were mentioning about the rhinos is how we believe that, you know, okay, so a species is going extinct, but we precisely have lost that consideration of how everything is connected. So, for example, talking about the bees, if the bees are eradicated, which are actually disappearing, there's a very cool documentary called Vanishing Bees. I definitely suggest watching it, how bees are vanishing in America specifically and around the world. There's also other examples of France, Italy, etc., to the point wherein they had to import bees and in America. And even though once that they were exposed to mostly monocultures in America, they started disappearing once again, which implies that there is an intervention from our side as human beings with mostly the systemic pesticides that is causing that bees, you know, are intoxicated, and maybe the pollen from the flowers, it's intoxicated, and maybe that's causing their disappearance. And so it's raising a big alarm because of the quote that I read at the beginning of this hangout. And so it is essentially why we have focused on monocultures, which implies there's no diversity. There's just this massive extension of plants, for example, a corn crop, wherein bees have no way to actually pollinate anything because there's no flowers. So in our consumerist mentality and our profit-making schemes, we stop considering the actual life givers, who are animals along with the plants, along with the entire environment, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And it's gonna come back around because, you know, when this time comes that bees do get extinct and we've got 4 years to live, I mean, what are we gonna do then? Like, what? So we have to, you know, understand the problem, understand that there is a serious issue going on where, you know, bees are dying off. They're getting to a point where it's becoming critical. So, you know, there's also like solutions to, going to local farmers markets and supporting local communities, local farmers, local gardens, to kind of cut back and, support local people. So, you know, we don't have to always rely on these big corporations who, you know, are only really looking for profit, only really looking to support their shareholders. And, you know, it's going to come from the community level of change to stop this, you know, avalanche that's coming, really.
Yeah, and also what we have witnessed is that there are solutions. I mean, in terms of technology, for example, there are solutions that are coming through the scientific community. But what has happened with this, Garb? Can you tell us a little bit more about it? Has there been some examples of developments that can counteract or countermeasures for this environmental degradation?
Yeah, I'll start with the food production. There's a community, well, Seattle is a good example of how they're creating food forests. So they're, you know, using a certain amount of acreage of land and creating all sorts of different foods that we can plant and grow, like apple trees, fig trees, different things like that. So they can have a locally based food production source for the communities around that area to go and get their produce, go get their apples, grapes, things like that, so they don't have to go to the grocery stores, you know, the huge nationalized grocery stores, and, you know, provide that source of, we need to eat, we need food, and, you know, provide the local source so people can go locally instead of going to, Walmart and, supporting that massive, you know, corporation that uses all these types of not so sustainable processes to get their products.
Yeah, what I would also say is that there has to be a readjustment of how businesses are created, and in terms of that comes also hand in hand with corporate social responsibility, where environmental sustainability is actually part of that. And what we have to do as people of the world is essentially start voting for that and start supporting all corporations, all businesses that are starting with this new, fresh idea of, for example, making their products sustainably made or using renewable sources of energy, so that we can also support that kind of business model. And the old mentality of, the more I produce, the more profit I get, has to be, let's say, upgraded to our current necessity. And speaking of this, we have a question from Anna Brix, and she's saying, we're seeing more and more people becoming environmentally aware, and the solution that's being promoted is usually to recycle, buy fair trade products, and cut back on consumption. Would you say that this is a solution, or are there other solutions?
Yeah, I would say it's a start for individual an individual person to go and recycle and educate yourself on where your products are coming. Also, to how the new iPhone has come out, to go and just buy an iPhone because the latest upgraded version is out and it's so sparkly and nice to look at. But really, is your phone broken? Is your phone not functioning anymore, or is your phone perfectly fine? So we as consumers also have a responsibility to ensure that we consider what we're buying, why we're buying it, letting go of the desires to get the new thing. So it takes a process for someone to walk those steps to become socially aware and kind of let go of the addiction to go and shop and buy the newest and greatest things. And recycling is also a cool measure you can take within your own home to start to reduce your footprint, so to speak, on the environment, and buy locally as well. Things like that. So yeah, I think it's a cool first step. The more global step is to really educate yourself on these issues, and the companies that you're supporting, how are they creating their products, what's going into it. Also your leaders, the people that you're putting into power, who are they within what they say? Are they someone who has integrity? Find local people, local community people that are more in line with your principles, and start to walk. Maybe it's not the easiest route to walk, but start to really stand within yourself, and because we need these we need our people like everyone, like a normal average person, to really start to step up and demand change, because it's needed. We all can see it, but we have to take that first step to move in that direction.
Yes, I would say also that, and I fully agree with taking on at a political level this aspect, and more so not only looking at the politicians up there in office. For example, in the apiculturist society, they have realized that, well, they cannot trust the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency in the US, because, for example, all the information that they get is coming from the producers of the systemic pesticides themselves. So that's essentially like a loophole there, and
Yeah.
only ourselves as community joining together and actually looking at the problem as, all scientific measures that one can evidently measure, and so look at what are possible solutions and implementing them without having to wait, for example, for a governmental agency to come and solve the problem. of course, I would also say in relation to this question that a lot of regulations have to take place, because a lot of the problems in terms of what we are using as overuse of resources, not respecting the cycles and natural cycles of renewable or regrowth of our plants, trees, and so forth, it's because our regulations are not taking that into consideration. So we do, and that's part of the living income proposal, that this aspect of environmental awareness is imprinted in the way that we function as an economy. So we will be also going more in depth in terms of economic sustainability in a hangout later on. But for now, we're looking at these environmental points. So yes, consumer awareness, also, being aware of how we support each other in terms of the products that we consume, but also informing yourself, educating oneself. It's like the best way to start really questioning what we buy and really investigating fair trade specifically. I definitely would place a question mark on that, if it is really fair and how that operates in Africa, which is a topic for maybe another hangout in itself. Thanks, Hannah, for your question. She's having another question. I work with kids, and what I've seen is that they're young and they're very concerned about the environment, but by the teenage years, they're lost in consumption. Why would you say that is? And how can we assist kids to care about the environment? That's part of our solution section, but let's jump into it. What do you say?
Yeah, so obviously the kids are learning from the adults, so we as adults, again, have to stand as the example to our children to show them how to recycle, for instance, or what it means to recycle. What are you actually doing when you throw a can in the recycling machine? Where is it going? So they understand and realize why they're doing it, because after when you're a child and your parent says recycle, 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 and they never explain why, it just goes in one ear and not the other, and you never really integrate it into yourself to, when you get older, to actually live that point. And also, I think it's like a systemic point that needs to be educated in, like, the school system and stuff. I'm sure it is somewhat, but more so, like, make it a focal point, so we can start to, because obviously the children are the future of our livelihoods, the survival of our planet, and they are very important to educate and make them realize, and help them become the environmentally and understanding of the environmental impact that they will have when they do get older. So I say it's we as adults have to stand as the example, as well as start to push the educational system to focus more on the environmental education process and all that includes.
Yeah, I would also say that, also learning how we are emotionally driven to consume. And there's even, I think it's dopamine that one segregates when you get something new, and that idea that I got something new, so I get this experience, this heightened experience, which is actually imprinted by the parents. So when they're very small and they give them something new, or they go and buy something, it's like, oh, look at what I bought you. And, there's this sense of, oh, you feel more than, just here it is, here's a new product. And so the child gets conditioned to that. Actually, at a neurological level, they get conditioned to seek for this pleasure that has led us to be compulsive buyers as well. And this, becomes part of our shopaholism, wherein people derive pleasure from buying, even if they don't really need things. So this is something that I would also walk with a child, to understand that getting something new or buying something new doesn't necessarily have to make you overly excited, but simply look at the very basic functionality of it, and if you really need it. And so also developing that sense of, this is the amount of money that it costs, this is what you're going to buy, investigate where does this product comes from, so that you're aware what you're buying into, and so how long you're going to be using it, take care of it properly so that you don't go and fall into the planned obsolescence of, oh, it's broken, now I have to buy one another. So there's tons of documentaries. I would definitely show documentaries to children specifically, and along with that, parents as well, because we all get informed in essence. Thanks, Anna, for your comment. So, Garb, let's look at the current solutions that we are looking at. You were investigating the recycling system in Sweden. What can you tell us about it?
Okay, I would say the Swedish recycling system is one of the top recycling system in the world currently. They're not absolutely perfect by any means, but they have reduced their waste production by 96%, and all homes they've reduced all home waste by 99%. So meaning that they have created a system through and through that is geared and integrated, and in all facets of the system have created this renewable recycling system to make sure that all their waste does get recycled. Unlike America, where we throw our trash on the sidewalk, we have recycling places to go to, and we have recycling as an aspect of our society, but it's not really implemented anywhere. There's no education, there's no incentive really to recycle, because it's much easier to just throw your trash on the side of the road, and there's no real incentive to recycle. But with the Swedish system, they see it everywhere, and they see their roads are nice, and you've been there, so you can attest to this. Their roads are nice and clean, and they have like the trash cans already segregated to plastic, glass, and paper. I mean, that's in places in America as well, but it's not hardly everywhere. But this system has it in all locations. And so when they get the waste, they take it into a factory type place, and they're separate. Everything's already separated. They have all machines, like underground tunnel machines that suck all the waste from when people throw it in the trash barrels. It gets sucked into sorting carts, say, and they take it to the factories. They recycle it, or they use the stuff that can't be recycled as energy to heat up the homes in Sweden, so they renew energy that way. And the exhaust that's getting released from burning this, they heat the homes through burning all the waste that they can't recycle, and they filter out what they can of the exhaust from the burning. And so there's it's not completely clean, because there is exhaust and waste coming out of that, but mostly they have created a pretty sustainable system in all areas of the Swedish community. And it's a cool example to look at and study for yourself, to start to, in your own country, say in America, start to implement these steps to create more of a renewable society for each country, not just Sweden. So that was a cool example of the study.
Yeah, what I also can say is that third world countries haven't really focused on that. I mean, in Mexico we have a huge problem in terms of there's no real, it is part of the culture. There is no sense of recycling or separating garbage or anything like that. And talking about Sweden, there is a system wherein it is like an ATM, literally, wherein you go and deposit your bottles and your glass bottles as well, and you get money back. So I was mentioning at the beginning of the Hangout this documentary called Canning in America, where people get cents of a dollar for the amount of kilos of plastic bottles and aluminum cans. But in Sweden, actually the consumer, you yourself, create that immediate reward. You get money back from all the products that you go and deposit there, which is a far more clean and sustainable way to deal with this, but then you would also have to give a proper job or living income, for example, for people in America. Also here in Mexico, for example, it's very common to see people getting all the cardboard, getting all these materials to get money back. So that is also part of what it means to be living in a first world country and third world countries, which, you know, in this case, America is also having that deficiency. Then we have also, in terms of the advancements at a technological level, we have cars, for example. What can you tell us about this?
Okay, yes. I mean, I would say everything that has been produced mostly has a solution in sustainability and renewable designs to create more efficient ways of producing our things that we use. For cars, for instance, we have cars that are run on air, like compressed air. And also like these hybrid machine, cars that run on battery powered, and as well as gas, but it's mostly battery powered. Also electric cars, they have electric cars now. I mean, it's not totally efficient and 100% clean energy, but it's much better than just the gas of, going to the station every week to pump up your car. It's not only bad for the environment, but it's also costly as well. And like these electric cars, like the Tesla cars are like the new latest and greatest gadget, but it's extremely expensive, so the average person can't afford those cars. So that's a problem within these products, is that it's expensive, and the cheaper way is the not so sustainable way. And also the politics within this. I mean, the companies own these, oil companies, for instance. They're very powerful. They have a lot of, they're integrated in all politics and different lobbying areas and stuff like that. So it's not so easy, but there are solutions out there. Another solution-oriented thing is, building houses. They have different materials that are sustainable, and like they have hemp concrete where it's made from hemp, but they won't go that route because the material will last much longer, and the stuff that's in place now is again the planned obsolescence. It's not so sustainable, but for the corporations that are in power and implementing these things, it's going to create a lot of profit for them. So I'd say a problem for the solution-oriented mindset is this political arena, and but again, there are solutions out there. There's many solutions.
Yeah, also the 3D printers and all the technological advancements in terms of obtaining renewable sources of energy are being tampered mostly, as you were saying, at a corporate political level. So we will have to intervene that to simply say, hey, that model is outdated. We cannot continue having this over 100-year model of producing more, or this industrial revolution type of resources using carbon and gas and oil as main sources of energy, when there's a lot of advancements already on this. So we have to actually push as a collective public opinion to use this kind of resources. So we have a couple of questions here. Let's go through them. This is coming from Joanna. She's saying, "Hi, ladies. Do you reckon that creating fines to those that don't recycle is a solution? At the same time, I see that many of the packaging in products is just unnecessary. Should we start by looking from the top bottom by stopping excessive production instead?" What would you say?
For the fines on the recycling, I would say individually, if we got to a point where it was educated and people knew about it, and it's been integrated into our society, to create fines would be an incentive for people to recycle. So in terms of where the situation is now, and the dire stress on the environment, I would say it would be cool to place a fine in for people to, if they don't recycle, they have to pay some kind of fee. And the packaging, yeah, I mean, there's a whole a whole myriad of places where we can become more environmentally friendly, and the packaging is one example where, to start, like even water, just put water in bottles from the faucets instead of going to buy these plastic bottles. So individually we can do that on our own, and once we start to gain more voice within the community level to start to affect the bigger levels, government and things like that, corporation level, that's a start. Doing the bottles and cutting down on your own carbon footprint.
Yes, and we go back again to that aspect of corporations actually using this very attractive packaging, because we as consumers have been taught or have been conditioned to look at the packaging, the colors, the image on the whole box, and then decide whether we buy it or not, or the best presentation is a product that I decide to buy. So that also goes hand in hand with our consumer responsibility at the same time. Whereas if we start considering that, well, we can get the same product in a less big package or so forth, then we can co-work. This is all about working together, not so much about creating this separation between corporations and consumers, but realize, as we were mentioning in our last hangout, that we have to work together by placing our demand based on, look, we don't require as much packaging, but once again, sometimes packaging is for the sake of keeping the product safe from robbery. That's very common as well. So that once again would have to be going hand in hand with, if you provide a living income to people and you have access to what you're required to buy, then maybe all of these very intricate ways to secure one product in the package will stop being so packaging and waste producing, essentially. So that's another outflow of that. Thanks for your question, Joanna. I do agree that from the top to the bottom has to be implemented, but at the same time from the bottom up at the same time. We have a question coming from Eleonora, and she's saying, in Germany they are testing a payback system for recycling and found a small town that implemented this and got their best results here in an article. She places the link. What do you think of it? We will check it out. She's saying, of course, a system that teaches that the reward is in the recycling is best, but what I see this as a cool point. I see this as a cool point because since the wet waste or organic waste is turned into biogas that is then sold to households for heating in Italy, so a share of the profit would make sense. Absolutely, and it's kind of like what you were mentioning on Sweden, right? They're doing something similar.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
And also, yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, they also have like solar power. They're in America, they're starting to make this more accessibility for people to go and put solar power on their house, and obviously the sun will create the electricity for the house, and they end up creating so much electricity from the sun that they get money back from the electrical companies. So I mean, there's options out there to support with creating these ways to, again, stop your footprint and help become more sustainable within your own living.
Yeah, I do say that also in what Eleonora mentions that's happening in Germany and Sweden is that it makes you directly aware of, oh, I've got this amount of bottles. Like we actually did it in Sweden with Anna, and we would go and place them on the ATM machine and you get your money back. So that's a great incentive to make ourselves aware of how we waste. And also I would say that a lot of the chemicals that are in our products, like here in Mexico, you can see green, purple, pink type of cleaners with all kinds of chemicals. And in Sweden, for example, I wouldn't be able to see that kind of products. Like it's all more now veered toward organic or biodegradable or something like that that
Yeah.
is supporting directly our use of our basic appliances and so forth, the use of energy in a sustainable manner. All of this has to become part of our culture and so make it part of our infrastructure, which at the moment, when you have a society or a country that is subsumed in mostly poverty and you don't have that basic support for the people, this kind of solutions unfortunately take a secondary position, which I suggest it doesn't, because without environment, without all the resources that we require to live, we will all end up subsumed in poverty of not having anything to eat. So that's one perspective there to throw in. Thanks a lot, Eleonora, for your comment. So, Garb, just to finish this hangout, we have a lot to discuss, but we actually run out of time. Your own process. I mean, how did you decide to become more educated on this? What triggered this within you, and what would you share with others as a point of inspiration to do the same?
Yes. I mean, for me, it made sense to start to look at ways to, because I mean, I see the waste all around me, and it's, at work even. I make sure I have recycling bins in all the areas, and I make sure people recycle, and they do it, and I'm the one that takes it and brings it home and divvies it out and recycles it at the end of the day. So it's just like, it's everywhere around me. So I just see, I within myself want to do something about it. I want to at least stand as an example, maybe for the people at work, for instance, to say, it can be done. It's not as easy as just throwing it in the garbage, but, what the result of it is, supporting the environment, supporting animals, supporting the children in the future, supporting our survival. So I mean, it's a very important thing. And I mean, I started doing it, and I realized really it's not that difficult if you have systems in place. I have bins for plastic, bins for glass, and there's local those, like you said, those recycling ATM machines. There's local ones around, so you kind of find out where they are, and you come together. Like my roommate or my partner that I live with, he also helps with the recycling, so you kind of get your friends involved and show the benefit, because you do get money in the end. You get some money back, and you also get to be part of the solution. So I think that's a cool thing, and that's where I started. I just wanted to be part of the solution rather than the problem.
Awesome example, and with this I'd also like to share how a crisis always leads us to create and innovate and start working at a community level to implement solutions. So this actually shows us that we have to also look at what kind of values we are promoting in our society. At the moment, it's all about this economic efficiency, which we will be talking about later on in a hangout, or competitivity, and not really looking at how we are intertwining this entire ecosystem, wherein we have to create symbiotic relationships. We have to support the ecosystem back so that we can get the benefit back ourselves, and implement that at an education level. It's very important that our education systems are actually veered toward creating this type of awareness, wherein solidarity takes the precedence over competitivity or just the sake of, for example, buying as a sense of success in reality, because that is destroying the planet, and that is a key aspect in which we can then tend to rather investigate what are the natural resources that we are using, what are the ways in which we can make them sustainable and renewable sources of energy, and how we can decide what to buy as well based on this information, because that will make us empowered individuals that co-create this sense of, as a community, as you were mentioning, as individuals become more aware of our effect of that our actions as consumers have on the environment. Yeah. So thanks a lot, Gar, for sharing with us.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
And we will see you guys, the viewers, next Sunday. We will continue our discussions on sustainability with also a specific example that we have prepared for you. And also remember that if you want to place comments, please leave them on the YouTube video. If you're watching after the live session of this, and subscribe to this channel, and we'll see you next Sunday at the same time. Goodbye.